Standardisation activity and internal quality assurance. So what is standardisation when we talk about it in the context of internal quality assurance? Well, we could say that it's training, develop and support to ensure that different assessors would make the same decision about a piece of evidence. So what we're saying here is that a piece of evidence shown to, say, 3 different assessors in your team, they would all make the same decision about that piece of evidence. This is typically what we mean by standardisation. It's often done as meetings, but can also be done at a distance or online. It's an opportunity for assessors to look at typical evidence and see if they are judging the evidence against the standards in the same way. Now this, together with point 1, is particularly important in terms of fairness and integrity of the standards and of assessment decision making generally. What we want to make sure that within a particular training organisation against a particular qualification, that no learner will gain an advantage or a disadvantage by being observed or assessed, for example, by a different assessor. In essence, it wouldn't matter which assessor assessed them, whatever evidence they presented, they would get the same decision and outcome. Now this clearly represents a challenge because different assessors are different people with different experiences and different expectations. So as I say, represents a challenge. But standardisation as an activity is a way of remedying those differences and making sure that where those differences do arise, that they are addressed and dealt with. So standardisation really forms part of IQA best practice. It is part of the role of being an IQA. Now, you as an IQA within an organisation may not be the person to lead standardisation practice. It might be for the lead IQA or a more senior person in the IQA team. However, all IQAs are part of that best practice aspect of standardisation because whatever decisions are made within standardisation exercises and activities are then standardised across not just the assessors that did that activity, but all the IQAs that are part of that. Again, to make sure that the same decisions are being made across different assessors in different parts of an organisation. And that goes for internal quality assurers too. Now, standardisation activities, when they are done, need to be recorded and evidenced for audit trail purposes. You need to keep records. This could be meeting minutes, or it could be taped or digital voice recordings of particular activities and so on. You might want to keep copies of the resources that you put together for the activities that go together with the meeting minutes and the recordings of conversations and so on, so that you've got a complete record of all your standardisation activities. Now these documents form part of the EQA and awarding organisation requirements as an approved centre. When a centre goes through the approval process with an awarding organisation, they will have agreed to do certain things. And one of those, of course, is to provide a robust internal quality assurance system, of which standardisation is a fundamental part. Therefore, the external quality assurer will want to see, read and check these documents when they come and do a visit. Also, standardisation allows the follow-up of actions and further assessor support if needed. And it creates consistency across practice, as we've been talking. This is particularly important again when it comes to managing the risk within assessment and making sure learners are only certificated when they have achieved the required standard. So as I've already said, standardisation meetings generally tend to be the way this kind of activity is delivered by internal quality assurers. Standardisation meetings mean getting a team or a group of assessors together in one room, allowing them to have a look at some evidence, judge that evidence and have a discussion about it all together. So standardisation meetings In order to create and prepare a standardization meeting, you would use IQA activity and feedback to form an agenda and priorities for activities in that meeting. You're going to look at reoccurring problems or challenges or reoccurring poor decisions that are being made to focus on. This might also include assessor feedback about particular concerns that they're having or areas of focus that they would like to work on. This may also form part of the agenda. You may have new or updated qualifications. These might be a priority, they might need to be delivered, and you may need to go over aspects of those new qualifications to make sure again that assessors are happy with what they're doing and are all approaching it in the same way. As the IQA putting the standardization meeting together, you will need to plan ahead and collate and collect the different evidence and forms for the activities that you'll need and be prepared on the day like you would for any other meeting. As we have been saying throughout these series of films, audit trail is absolutely paramount. So someone will want to take minutes for the meeting, save the records, including perhaps the activities themselves. Maybe you'll have a digital voice recording of the activities and so on. Any evidence that can be saved to make sure that there is a clear audit trail of activity so that this can be presented to the external quality assurer on their visit. And finally, it's worth considering the point that it's important to create a safe environment within the standardization meetings that allows assessors to explore and share their experiences and to give their opinions without fear of judgment. Otherwise, how else could they learn? Now, what to consider when deciding on what to standardize in your standardization meeting? So as we've said, areas of consistently poor or weak assessment decisions, units or outcomes where learners are repeatedly referred, feedback from learners about delivery issues or resource issues, feedback from the external quality assurer following their sampling, new or changed qualifications, what has been standardized before, and changes to personnel within the assessor team and recruitment of new assessors. In many training organisations, the opportunities in getting everyone together are few and far between, so taking advantage of having everyone in the same room at once is really important. Now, standardisation meetings are also an opportunity for team building. They could include other agenda items such as organisational updates and input from other people within the organisation. Now, as we hinted at the start, standardization can be done remotely. So what we mean here is that standardization is completed without everybody in the room. Let's just have a look at some of the approaches we can take to remote standardization activities. Well, in terms of setup, it's pretty much the same approach as you would have as meetings. You would still collect evidence and forms and you base that on experience of IQA and feedback from the assessors and what's going on out there in terms of referred learners and things like that to create the content of your meeting. So the same approach would apply. But obviously, instead of everybody being in the room, you might email evidence or send evidence through other online approaches to make sure that people have access to it. You can put a deadline for completion and return to you of that evidence and those judgments. You as the IQA can then review all those returned judgments from your assessors and the different decisions that they've made, and you could write a report providing feedback based on this. You might decide to have a conference call or a web meeting to give that feedback to the team as a whole. You can then put a report together, attach all your evidence and the activities that you did, and you've still got your audit records for audit trail. You might be able to use webinar platforms if they're available to run standardizations. That works perfectly well. And in the same way as you would with a meeting, you'll be able to follow up any specific development points raised with individual assessors. So that's a look at standardisation activity and the internal quality assurer.